The first thing that draws people's attention when they look at a picture of a face is the eyes. There's something about eyes that's just draw the focus, and therefore they're the most important part of the face and very important in retouching. This eye is already looking pretty good, but we're going to work on it and just add a little bit more emphasis to this eye. First thing we want to do is duplicate the background layer just to protect our original. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to darken these eyelashes a little bit. Let's zoom in so we can see what we're looking at. Hold down the space bar and we can navigate and move around. The eyelashes are actually looking pretty good already, but we're going to darken them up a bit more just so you can see the technique and apply it to other images. Grab the burn tool. Make sure the range is set for shadows. By using shadows, it's going to ignore the highlights and the midtones. And have the exposure set pretty low. 10 is actually looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now is just click and drag. Oh, make sure you have a good brush size. Right now we're using 125 soft brush. That'll work pretty good on this image because it's a very high resolution image. And we'll just click and drag and watch what happens. See how the lashes are darkening up? Because just the shadows are being affected by this tool right now. Notice the highlights are not being affected, and neither are the mids. And this is just making these eyelashes pop a little bit more, adding a little more emphasis to the eye. Let's look at it before and after. The next thing we're going to do is we've got some red here in the whites of the eye. We're just going to clean that up a little bit. Let's choose a quick mask tool and choose a brush. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to paint just on the inside of the eye. We just want to select this white part. We could use a selection tool if we wanted. We could use the pen tool or lasso tools, but right now I'm just going to use a quick mask. It's a quick way of making a selection where you have some control. There we go. Just grab the circular marquee tool, drag it out, hold down the shift key to constrain it to complete circle, and then use the space bar to move it around while still holding down the mouse button. We just want to make a selection around there. Hit the delete key just to give a clean selection. Let's soften it a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of a feather. Let's choose a blur. Gaussian blur. Notice the harsh edge there. We just want to soften that off a little bit. In this case, we're using, let's drop it down a little bit too. Now, we want to turn this mask into a selection. We can either hit the Q key or just click back down here. Now we have a selection. But first of all, notice that there's a selection that is running here because everything is selected except for the mask area. So we just need to invert that selection. So we just go select, inverse. Now just our white area is selected. We want to copy just this area to a new layer. Make sure that our top layer there is selected. Then we go layer, new, layer via copy. Now just the whites have been copied to their own new layer. And we can name that whites. We want to remove the red. So we'll choose Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation. Now as you know, the hue changes the color, the saturation changes the amount of the color, and the lightness will just lighten or darken. What we want to do is reduce the saturation. We can either click on the word saturation and pull, or pull on the handle and just desaturate the red, but not too much. We want to just barely have it showing and click OK. Now that's cleaned up the whites of the eye. The last thing we're going to do is we want to add some emphasis just around the edges of these eyes. So using the circular marquee tool, hold down the shift key, use the spacebar to navigate. We want to select just around the outside of the eye. There we go. Create a new layer. Now choose a brush tool. Set black for the foreground color. Right now we have a 100 pixel radius. That'll work pretty good. If you're working on a smaller, low resolution image, you'll want to use a smaller brush. Now just click and drag around the edge. Just barely on the inside. We just barely want to darken it. Just a little bit on the inside. There we go. Let's turn off the selection. Notice we've gone over the edges a little bit. Just choose the eraser tool. Clean that up. Maybe clean it up down here just a little bit. Let's soften that a little bit with a blur. Filter blur. Use the Gaussian blur again. That's a good setting. Notice how it's just a little bit soft. It's still got some definition, but it's not a solid harsh edge that's looking artificial. Now we want to change the blending mode of this layer. Let's change that to color burn and drop the opacity all the way to 0. Now watch here as we slowly increase the opacity. Until we get to about there. We don't want to overdo this. This is a subtle effect. Right now we've got 30%. Is looking pretty good. Let's apply that. And that's our retouched eye. Let's look at it before and look at it afterwards. Let's zoom out so we can see the entire image. See what it looks smaller. There's the eye. Before retouching, after retouching. It's a very subtle effect, but very effective.